Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. I love speaking to YAF. Every time I speak to students, I just remind them, in case you're feeling down on yourself, or in case you've been bullied by your professors or your progressive friends, that you are so far ahead of where most people are at your age. I wasn't nearly as involved in politics as I should have been when I was in college, when I was in high school, and you guys are so far ahead of where most people are. So you should just pat yourselves on the back, give yourself a little round of applause for being so great. You don't have to actually do that, but in your head, you can just think about it. So good job to y'all for contributing to the common good, for being involved in something that's bigger than yourselves. Really, one of the biggest problems that we see with young people, I always say millennials, but you guys aren't millennials. I'm a millennial, which means I'm old now. The problem that people say with young people is that we are so concerned with only ourselves. We're only concerned with our own happiness, our own feelings, our own pursuits, and anything that gets in the way of our own convenience should just be shunned. That's how a lot of us think. But you guys are beyond that, because just by being here, you are educating yourself about something that's bigger than you. You're figuring out how to be involved in a movement that's bigger than just your life, and you should be really proud of that, honestly. I'm proud of you. And when I come to these things, I'm also extremely encouraged, because we hear all of the time, I saw some statistic that only 12% of millennials have conservative values, and I'm just going to lump you guys, Generation Z, into that as well. There's a small percentage of us that have conservative values. That means we are the minority, we are countercultural, we are radical, and we can make a difference just by existing. So be encouraged by that. And it's going to sound like, I wanted to start with, sorry, I started like 3 different sentences, but I wanted to start with something encouraging and positive, because I'm just going to go down into a kind of sad place, not a really sad place, but a kind of, I guess, negative place for a little bit, but then I'm going to bring us out of it. So I'm going to talk about tribalism in politics, partisanship in politics, why we have become so divided, kind of what the narrative is on the left that has really driven us apart, try to analyze how we got here, but then I'm going to bring us out of it at the end, and I'm going to give us 2 things that we need to do as young conservatives to combat that partisanship. So if you haven't noticed, which I know you have, all of you probably have TVs, or you log into Twitter and you see just how divided we are, how much we really, and maybe not us, but a lot of people look to others on the other side of the aisle and really say, I do not like you. Not like I don't agree with you, or I don't like your principles, I don't like your values, but I do not like you. This happens on both sides of the aisle, and this has really increased over the past 20 years. Partisanship in politics, a study by Pew Research that was published a year ago, it really analyzes how we've changed so much, how the left really has changed so much when it comes to policy views, and how the right has really stayed the same, and how that's driven us apart. There's an unprecedented number of people that are on the edges of the parties, on the right and the left, and then there's a low number of people that are in the middle. So if you look at the graphs in this Pew Research study, if you look just 10 years ago, there was a lot of people in the middle, meaning people that have conservative views, people that have liberal views. Now, that's not the case. It kind of looks like this. So there's a lot of people on the right, a lot of people on the left, very few people that can say that they're in the middle, and then there's even bigger number on the far left than there is on the far right. So there's a lot of moderate conservatives, not very many moderate liberals anymore. There's a lot of people on the far left. And if you look at the policy issues on race, on immigration, on welfare, on all of these things, we've drifted further and further apart. The left has gotten radically more progressive, not just in the past 20 years, but also in the past 10 years. Things that we used to just say, oh yeah, well obviously, for example, there's a difference between a man and a woman. Yeah, obviously sex corresponds with gender. Obviously illegal immigration is wrong. And even 20 years ago, the Clintons were saying abortion should be legal, safe, and rare. That's not the case anymore. They have changed on all of those things, in particular on race. I think that we know that racial tensions have gotten a lot worse in the past 10 years. There's a particular question that they ask, or really statement that they put in this Pew study that says, the statement that they made Republicans, Democrats agree on or disagree with was the main reason why black people can't get ahead these days is because of racial discrimination. They had to agree or disagree. In 2009, Republicans and Democrats almost agreed on that. They almost agreed that it's not racial discrimination. Very few people believed that it was racial discrimination that was holding the black community back. By the time Barack Obama had left office, so from 2009 to 2017, in 2009 it was about 30% of Democrats who believed it was racial discrimination rather than personal responsibility holding black people back. In 2017, that number had jumped to 68%, the highest that it had ever been. So after 8 years of a black president, the Democrats went from believing that racial discrimination was not the reason, it was personal responsibility, to racial discrimination is the reason. Now, did racism actually increase during that time? Is there any metric by which racial discrimination increased? No, but progressivism got more progressive. Conservatives stayed about the same. And so we are further apart than we've ever been, and conservatives hear over and over again that we are the extremists, we are the bigots, we are the radicals, when really, we just believe the things that we have believed for decades. They're the ones that have really changed. And we look at these disagreements that we have, and it might seem like, gosh, this is so complex. Why are we talking about gender? Why are we talking about gender roles? Why are we even debating illegal immigration? It seems like everything has gotten so complicated. But really, those disagreements are not what is driving us apart. They're not what's driving us apart. What's really driving us apart is our fundamental disagreements. Those high-level, complex disagreements that we have about gender, immigration, race, culture, identity politics, intersectionality, all of these things. Yes, they're complicated, but they're not primarily what is driving us apart. What's driving us apart is our fundamental disagreements. Americans have always disagreed on certain policy things, certain cultural things, but we have fundamental disagreements that we're having a very hard time getting past. Fundamental disagreements like, does truth exist? Does morality exist? Is the family important to society? Is the Constitution a good document to look to? Is America a good place to live? Is freedom essential for human flourishing? And of course, as conservatives, we say yes to all of those things, of course. But those aren't things that we can take for granted anymore. Those are some real disagreements that we have that are driving us apart. Because the left, in general, not everyone on the left, but in general, the left would say, well, no, actually, America isn't that great of a place to live. We are riddled with inequality and injustice. And no, freedom it's not necessary for human flourishing. Actually, it's more important that the government takes care of you. Freedom is not really a high priority. The Constitution, well, look what happened with the Constitution. We had slavery and Jim Crow. The Constitution's not a good document. They say, family, it's not that essential to a healthy society. They say truth, relative, morality, basically, whatever I think. Those are the basic disagreements that we have that we can't seem to come together on. And that has really happened majoritively over the past 10 years. And conservatives, all we're doing is saying, whoa. Are you sure that that's the path that we want to go down? Are you sure we want to throw out all of these things on which Western civilization, the best civilization in all of human existence, is built on, that America was built on and has thrived on? Do we want to throw away those things? We look at these things that the left wants to throw out, like absolute truth, and say, well, absolute truth actually does exist. Morality in some sense does exist. Even if it's some vague idea, it does exist. If it doesn't exist, then you don't have any right to feel slighted when someone steals from you. You don't have any right to feel outrage about human rights violations that are happening in North Korea or something like that. But you do. And the reason for that is because in the human heart is this feeling of right and wrong. We all have some kind of moral compass. Throughout human history, there's always been some kind of sense of justice and injustice. Injustice being some form of corruption of power or manipulation or deception. Justice taking care of, in some way, the least of these, making sure there is equity and equality. We've all had some kind of idea of that. So, of course, absolute truth and morality exists. They say, well, the family isn't essential to society. Well, okay, let's look at the facts on that. Well, 1 in 4 kids lives in a home without a father, and we know that fatherlessness in general leads to delinquency. It leads to teen pregnancy. It can, not always, but it can lead to greater instances of poverty, of not graduating from high school, and those individuals make up communities. Communities make up society. So actually, the family, having a mom and a dad raise children, is very important to society. Okay, so we know that that's not right. The Constitution is the greatest document in human history because it's guaranteed freedom, which makes America the greatest country in the world, the only country that has dedicated its time to freeing both our allies and our enemies. So we know that that's not true. So all of these fundamental things that we disagree with or that we disagree on is really driving us apart. And all conservatives are doing are backing up and saying, are we sure we want to go there? Are we sure that we want to throw these things away? Because humans have really thrived on these truths for a long time. The problem is they don't want to have that conversation. That as soon as we back up and just ask a question, well, I don't know, don't you want to talk about how family is essential to society? Shouldn't we talk about how the human spirit actually flourishes when it's liberated? Shouldn't we talk about that? Another thing that they try to attack is work. They say work is not inherently moral. It is inherently moral. If you believe in the Bible, you know that work came before the fall of man, meaning that it is inherently good. It is not corrupt. It is not evil. It is something that human beings are supposed to do, that we are made to do to contribute to society. They try to say that that's not moral. It actually is. And when human beings stop working, they become purposeless. When they become purposeless, they become depressed. When they become depressed, they become suicidal. So you're telling me that work isn't moral? You're telling me that the government should just take care of us and we shouldn't have to work? Whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's back up for a second. Let's ask some questions. They don't want to. They don't want to have the conversation about that. Why? Well, I'll answer that in just a second by starting here. So this idea of postmodernism has really made its way into American society. It's something that happened or really kind of started in the 1940s after World War II. It was kind of a rejection of modernism, which they attached to totalitarianism, and it was this idea that truth doesn't exist, that morality is suppressive, that any kind of idea of an objective principle or a universal principle is wrong, that the individual is the prism through which everything travels. So I decide my own reality. I decide my own truth. I decide my own purpose, my own happiness. That's the only thing that matters. Postmodernism is self-referential. Postmodernism is the idea that you are the center of your universe. You are the only thing that matters. Pursue your own feelings of goodness and you'll be perfectly fine. That's all that matters. So postmodernism has really, some people say it has waned, it's kind of waxed and waned over the past century, but certainly this idea that I am the center of my universe, that the individual is the only thing that matters, that we're not created for a greater purpose, that there is no absolute truth. Certainly that idea has really seeped into American society. But as it turns out, human beings are wired to look for truth. Even an atheist has some kind of higher moral order that they think that they need to attain, that other people need to attain as well. Everyone believes in some kind of absolute truth, even if it's that there is no absolute truth. That in and of itself is an absolute truth. So everyone is trying to attain to some kind of higher moral orders. Everyone's looking for some kind of faith, for some kind of religion. Even the atheist has to have faith that there is no God, and that's a big leap of faith. But So what we are looking for is something to fill that void. Postmodernism doesn't fill that void. Me being the center of my universe doesn't fill that void. So what has come in to fill the void is progressivism. Progressivism is a religion. It is not a political ideology. It is not a set of policies. It is a religion that they feel deeply in their hearts. That is what has filled in the void that postmodernism left. Because honestly, being the center of your universe isn't very sustainable. So what those people have done who have said there is no morality, there is no absolute truth, there are no objective principles, have said, okay, I still kind of believe that in some ways, but I'm going to fill that hole with progressivism. So the government is going to become our God. Intersectionality will become our song. Political correctness will become our worship. And therefore, anyone who disagrees with me doesn't just have a different idea, they're a blasphemer. They're a heretic. They're a sinner. So when we conservatives say, hey, maybe let's reassess this whole postmodern progressivism thing before we, throw out everything that has made the Western world good, it's not just that we are presenting different ideas, it's that we are violating their conscience. We are violating their religion. It is deeply offensive to them on a spiritual level. And see, they'll demean religion, they'll demean absolute truth, they'll demean people who believe in God, they'll demean thoughts and prayers, but they are just as religious as any devout Christian, as any devout Jewish person. Their God is the government. They believe that progressivism is the only religion that is tolerable. That's why it's justified to call us Nazis, to dehumanize us, to take us off of Twitter, to censor us, to silence us, to dox us, to protest outside of our houses and threaten our families. Because we are violating their religion, the only faith that they think is legitimate. So the question is, if you haven't gotten scared already that these people are basically running our technology, running our mainstream culture, and running our media, the question is, what do we do in the face of that? What do we do in the face of such a dark ideology that has a history of deadliness, has a history of violence? What are we supposed to do with that, especially when the majority of our generations are buying into it, when they've been guilted into it? And let me back up before I say what exactly we do. The reason why so many young people have bought into it is because it's actually better if you do not think to be a progressive. You don't have to think at all to be a progressive. And that's why young people like it, because we're kind of lazy. Like, we just open up our phone and our phone tells us what to think. So all we have to do is search anything on Google or just scroll on Facebook, scroll on Twitter, see what Ariana Grande says, see what Kim Kardashian is marching for. Easy, we're a progressive. If we don't have any worldview, we don't have any anchor, we don't have any critical thinking skills whatsoever, you're going to become a progressive. There's no doubt. You don't drift into conservatism. You don't drift into liberty. You drift into progressivism because it's easy. It's so easy to be a young progressive. It's very hard to be a young conservative. That's why there are so few of us. Critical thinking is hard, especially in a day and age that is saturated with instant gratification and finding answers like that typically skew to the left. So anyway, what do we do in the midst of all of this craziness, in the midst of all of this confusion? There are two things, and in my humble opinion, there are people that are much smarter than me that may have other advice for you. But in my humble opinion, what do we do? Number one, we fight for truth. Number two, you love your neighbor. One, you fight for truth. Number two, you love your neighbor. So what does that mean? What is truth? Well, there are a lot of different things that are true. Now, of course, I am a Christian, so I believe that all truth is God's truth, that all truth descends from God and His Word. You might not be a Christian, but I would ask you to define where your truth comes from. If you don't believe in a higher being, then why do you believe in truth? And if you don't believe in truth, then why are you a conservative? But I'll go down that road later. So fight for truth, and that could be different for everyone. Not that everyone has their own relative truth, but in that the thing that you fight for could be that you are pro-life and you're going to fight for the truth that life is life at conception and that it's worth fighting for. You could fight for the truth that illegal immigration harms communities and harms immigrants, and that you're going to fight for that. It could be free speech. It could be the Constitution in general. It could be, religious liberty, whatever it is. Maybe it's just conservatism. And how you do that also changes. It could just be you're in the private sector, you're a business person who conducts your business in an honest way that puts forward, moral conservative principles in what you do. It could be that you're just a student that lives your life that way. It could be that you're an activist. It could be that you're in the media. Maybe you're a journalist that actually practices honest journalism. It could be a lot of different manifestations of fighting for truth. And that's going to get more and more difficult. The more and more devout and zealous they become in their religion of progressivism, the harder it is for us to stand up for truth. But it's worth it. It's worth it. And just remember, too, when you're thinking about your activism or your conversations with your friends or conducting your business, being a journalist, whatever it is, and fighting for the conservative principles that are true, fighting for freedom, just remember that it's not you that is crazy. You're going to get told over and over again that because you're a conservative, it is you that is crazy. Just remember that it is their views that have changed so radically over the past 10 years, not yours. And your views are supplemented and are proven by history that yes, freedom works. Yes, the Constitution is good. Yes, America is great. Yes, capitalism alleviates poverty. Yes, life is life at conception. Science proves that. Yes, illegal immigration is wrong. Even Democrats used to agree on that. Yes, these things are true. You are not weird for believing those things. You are not a bigot. You are not a bad person. You just believe in reality. And when people tell you that you're wrong, ask them to back it up. The burden of proof is not on you. It's on them. Because all they have are feelings and you have fact. The burden of proof seems to always be on conservatives to prove our arguments. Never on liberals. It's liberals assertions that are just taken at face value because they feel that way, because they tell you one story that proves their point, anecdotal evidence, and that's supposed to be it. And conservatives are over here trying to spout statistics, and we look mean. It shouldn't be on us to prove things that we know to be true. That doesn't mean that we don't. It doesn't mean that we don't use facts, but I'm talking about in conversations and in arguments, the burden of proof isn't only on you, it's also on them. You should ask them why they believe what they believe. So don't stop fighting for truth, and remember that it's not you that's crazy for being a conservative. It's them. Number 2, love your neighbor. This is much less political. It doesn't really, I will get to the political aspect of it, but loving your neighbor just means serving, caring, giving for those around you. That doesn't actually have to be your literal neighbor. It could be, maybe it's your roommates in college, maybe it's your professor, maybe it's the people that you know, maybe it's your family. Loving them, going out of your way to serve them, to make them happy, to meet their needs. Love your neighbor and put the politics aside. People on the other side of the aisle, they're still human beings. They just have bad ideas. We can't be like them to think that just because they think differently than us that they're bad, evil people. They might have bad, evil ideas, but what's likely is that, especially if they're your age, they just haven't thought them through. They just haven't. They probably do have good intentions. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez probably does have good intentions. She just doesn't have good ideas. So remember that. Remember that when you're talking to your friends across the aisle or people that you know across the aisle, that they're human beings. And that probably you have more in common than not in common. So love your neighbor, and there's also a political component to that. And the political component is that conservatives do not have an argument for self-governance, which is one of the main arguments of conservatives, if not the main argument, self-governance, if we are not moral people that take care of others. Because that's what the government is for. That's the argument that progressives make, is that who's going to take care of these poor people? Who's going to take care of the old people? Who's going to take care of the marginalized? And the conservatives' answer should be me. I will. I'll step up to the plate. I will help the poor. I will serve the poor. I will help the mother that's in destitution that doesn't know if she wants to have an abortion or not. I'm going to be there for her. And you can't do everything. You can't save the world. You're not going to be able to meet the needs of everyone, but I bet you can meet the needs of a few people in your life. It's much more hypocritical for a conservative to be selfish than it is for a progressive. Because we say this a lot. Oh, why isn't Bernie Sanders giving more to charity? Why doesn't he give, one of his houses to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? Well, they don't believe in that. Why would they? They don't believe in that. They believe that the government should take care of people. They don't believe that people should have needs that are met by other individuals. We do. We believe that it's our responsibility to take care of our families, to take care of our communities. So it is necessary that we are moral. It's necessary that we love our neighbor if we want to have any argument for self-governance. So when people ask me, should we fight fire with fire? Should we stoop to the level that the left does? Should we start doxing and protesting and doing all of the terrible things that we see on the left? I say, yes, if you want big government, if you want socialism to win, if you want to devolve into anarchy so the government has to swoop in and save us, then sure. If you want conservatism to die, then yes. But if you don't, if you care about liberty, if you care about self-governance, then you'll care about morality, you'll care about compassion, you'll care about individual responsibility, and you'll pick up those who need to be picked up. There is this weird strand, maybe it's in you libertarians out there, of people who think that helping other people and giving other people a hand up is a form of socialism, and people just need to work harder. That's not true. Even our best conservatives realized, Ronald Reagan realized, that sometimes people fall down on their luck. Sometimes people lose their jobs or they get sick and they can't pay for something. It should be us. We step up to the plate. We do everything we can in our own lives to help those who need help. That's our best argument against big government, that we don't need it. We don't need big government because we've got it. The government never helps you without telling you what to do. That's why we believe in self-governance, because we believe that we can take care of people and allow them to be free. The government cannot do that. So fight for truth and love your neighbor. Those are the two things that we do in the face of this chaos. Those are the two things that, yes, they can censor us. Yes, they can take us off Twitter. But really in our own lives, they cannot stop us from doing that. There is no law against love. There is no law against taking care of people. There is no law yet against truth. So fight for truth and love your neighbor. That's it.
Guys, if you want to do the same thing as last time, just line up back there. I have the first question from our virtual pass attendee. This is Kelly from Missouri. She asks, in your opinion, what is the most dangerous part of the Me Too movement? And as conservative women, how do we still advocate for and support survivors of sexual assault while also pointing out the hypocrisy of the left when it comes to social movements like this?
I think the most dangerous part of the Me Too movement is the emasculation of men. This idea that society is going to be completely egalitarian if feminism has its way. That's just not true. If you look at the most egalitarian society, I think it's Sweden and Norway. They've completely, made all of their laws egalitarian. But the differences between men and women are still stark as far as professions go, as far as the roles go in the household and in society. They have a large gap between men and women as far as gender stereotypes. It just doesn't work that way. There is a difference between men and women. That's what I worry about in the Me Too movement, that it's turning into a matriarchy where men need to take a back seat and be a little bit quieter. Women need to be louder. We need to vote for women. We need to pick women. We need to hire women. We need to put women on the board. That's not necessarily true. That's just another form of patronizing women, because we're not judging them based on their competence. We're judging them based on their victimhood because they're women. I don't want to be victimized. I don't want to be patronized. I want to know that because I am competent, because I am qualified, because I am the best at what I do, that I am going to be chosen. And honestly, I'll just say something kind of scandalous. If I had to pick between a patriarchy and a matriarchy, I would pick the patriarchy every single time. It's worked. It's worked in societies before. And how do we help women of victims of sexual assault? Now, let me say one good thing about the Me Too movement. Oh, also, I was told to look at the camera when I answered these, so that's why I'm not looking at you guys. So one good thing about the Me Too movement that I think is really good, that I've had friends that have done this, I know people that have done this, that because of the Me Too movement, they felt like there was cover. They felt like, okay, because other people talked about their stories, I can do it too. I'm not weird. I don't have to be ashamed. I can be brave enough to talk about what happened to me. I think that is good. I am so glad about that. There have been people whose marriages have been saved because of that, because the woman said, this happened to me when I was little and I need to go through this. This is traumatizing me. That's good. Women should be brave enough to come out, and we should create an environment in which women are comfortable to do that. We should also create an environment of truth, where the truth is believed, where there is, when it comes to actual due process, maybe not just, in a friendship relationship, but when it comes to due process, there should be evidence, that there should be justice, that we shouldn't wander away from that just because we want to believe all women. I think the Me Too movement went from hear her, which is good, to believe her, and that's where we lost allegiance to truth. Hear her, good. Believe her, maybe.
Thanks, Allie. Very good speech.
Thank you.
I was really impressed what you were talking about with morality, and I think it comes down to virtue. I think what I fear is that the modern day right, what I think most of us here are transforming to classical liberalism.
Yes,
and I think
totally.
we're getting away from classical republicanism, and I think what we were founded on was classical republicanism, believing in what you said, focusing on society,
yes.
Virtue, everything
Yes.
being about virtue. Do you think that's something we should be returning to more?
Yes, and I think that because we've seen a trend of young people kind of leaving the church and leaving religion, we have decided, okay, well, the only way we're going to appeal to them is libertarianism, or the only way we're going to appeal to them is classical liberalism, that just do whatever you want and the government's not going to get in your way, be a conservative, which there's certainly part of that, and a lot of people believe that and are good conservatives. I'm not saying everyone has to ascribe to the exact same form of conservatism, but I would push back on that by saying that there's really no reason, unless you believe in some kind of higher power, there's really no reason for you to believe that the government shouldn't dictate your rights. Conservatives believe in the Declaration of Independence that our rights were endowed to us by a creator, that all men were created equal because of that. If you don't believe that, then you have to be able to answer the question, where do your rights come from? And if you don't believe in a higher power, the giver of rights, the giver of a moral law, then you have to cite a source. And if you don't believe in anything higher than us, then that source has to be mankind. And if you believe that mankind has the power to give and take away rights, why are you a conservative? Why do you believe in small government? That means that the government has every right to take your rights away, because you don't believe that our rights come from a higher power. The reason we believe in small government, the reason we believe in self-governance, is because we believe that the government is no higher than us, that the Constitution guarantees rights that are inherent, not rights that were given to us by the government, or else they can take them away as well. You have no reason to fight for the Second Amendment. They're their rights to give and take. So I fear that the more we go away from that, the more we go away from a higher moral order or a higher power, haven't even gotten into Christianity yet, the more honestly susceptible we are to just falling into progressivism. The morality component is very important to conservatism. That doesn't mean everyone's perfect, doesn't mean everyone's a Christian. But the morality component, the virtue component, the higher power component is extremely essential to conservatism for it to last. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Zach from Embry-Riddle. My question is, I agree with you on the point that people need to continue working, but with the increase of automation and technology, there's the possibility that jobs could go away in the future. How can we keep people working and getting an income with keeping the government out of it?
Yeah, I think that that's really difficult and a really good question. I was actually just listening to I don't know if y'all listened to the Sunday special with Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro, but they were actually just talking about this, and and they were talking about, I think it was Tucker that said that he would make sure that there were no self-driving cars or no self-driving trucks. Of course, that does take government intervention. But you have to ask yourself, is that better for society in the long run? I'm not sure. I don't know exactly yet how much government intervention I would be comfortable with when it comes to that, but I'm also not comfortable with self-driving cars and everything being automated and working class people, middle class people being out of a job. Not everyone is technologically savvy. Those of us who are in the creative industry will always have a job, but there are a lot of people who aren't. There are a lot of people who are not in the creative industry, and they need to have jobs as well. But at the same time, it's also just the evolution of society, that when factories came around, women had to get out of the house because everything that they were doing in the house, making clothes, things like that, they no longer had to do because everything became automated in that era since. So it's also that. But so anyway, I know that's not a very satisfying answer. I just haven't figured out yet. I haven't figured out the government's role in preserving jobs that are not automated.
Okay.
So, sorry.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kevin, and I'm from Embry-Riddle. And I was wondering if there's a podcaster or a news organization, other than the former newspaper, the New York Times, that you would recommend to get like a good argument from the left from.
Oh, from a good argument. So a leftist podcast?
Yes.
Well, it depends on what you mean by good argument, but an argument is, Pod Save America basically is the representation, I think, of what a lot of the left thinks. Now, if you can stomach the sanctimony that you're going to have to listen to for an hour and just how self-righteous and hating of conservatives they are, it's going to be hard to get through it. But I do think that it does, it's popular on the left. So it's probably a good podcast to listen to understand what they're thinking.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Courtney. I attend Butler University. My question is, do you think that the left realizes that they overplayed their cards with the Kavanaugh situation now that the midterms are over and the Democrats who voted against him are gone? Or do you think we'll continue to see that sort of behavior from the left?
I think that some Democrats do. You don't really hear them talk about Kavanaugh anymore. Gosh, you got a gang rapist on the Supreme Court. Shouldn't you still be protesting? I would be. But I don't think that they believe that. I think that they see that it really fell apart. And I also think that they saw how enthusiastic Republicans, and particularly Republican women, more than any other voter group on the right and the left, became more enthusiastic after the Kavanaugh hearings than any other group. That's pretty amazing. I think they saw that. Now, I think that they're disgusted by it. I think that they still believe Dr. Ford. When I was at UC Berkeley, I was speaking to a class, and this student thought that she had me. She thought that she was going to put me in a corner. And she was like, "So tell me, you don't believe Dr. Ford?" I was like, "Oh, girl, you got another thing coming." I was like, I don't believe, maybe she was assaulted, but I don't believe that Kavanaugh actually assaulted her. And I really think that a lot of people on the left are amazed and shocked and just incredulous that anyone would believe Kavanaugh. I think that they are so lost in their own echo chambers and their own identity politics that they still cling to that narrative. They might think it was a tactical disadvantage, but I don't think that they believe that they were morally wrong.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Allie. My name's
Hi.
Dylan. I'm a student at the University of Florida. First, I'd like to
I think
thank
I met you
Yeah.
the other night. Good to see you.
I'd like to thank you for coming to speak here. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. My question is regarding, you mentioned earlier that there's increasing polarization,
Yes.
both on the right and the left. And I think everyone here would agree that a solution to that is debate. However, I've seen a tendency on both the right and the left to generalize one side as not wanting to have the discussion. In order to decrease this polarization, how can we stop that desire to say they don't want to have a discussion, the generalization of one side over another? Because I think both conservatives and liberals are guilty of it.
Yeah, I haven't, well, maybe, and I totally admit my own bias. I don't know very many conservatives that don't want to debate. Now, I know conservatives that are not good debaters, but most of the time, I would say conservatives want to debate, and most of the time, if it's a group that doesn't want to debate, it is the left. That doesn't mean everyone on the left doesn't want to debate, but that's just kind of what we see, the emotionalism, and if you disagree with me, you're a bad person. But of course, then you see things like Politicon, and there are debates that happen there. There are debates that happen on college campuses. SMU, for example, they have a good example of, or I think they have a really good bipartisan relationship to where they have the debates, and they also have events together. I think it's just working within your small circles and reaching across the aisle and trying to orchestrate those things. You don't have to do it in a large-scale way. It doesn't have to try to bring all Republicans and all Democrats together, but you can just bring a few friends together or a few people from different groups on a college campus and then debate things. I would say start in your small circle and have those conversations there, and if you want to work outward, you can. Now, like I said, I think that's going to get increasingly hard, but maybe if you start with people that you have a relationship with and are friends with, maybe that would be productive.
Okay, this is our last question, and it's another virtual pass question. This is from Lauren in Wisconsin, and her question is, there seems to be an extreme disconnect in messaging when it comes to talking to liberals about true feminism that conservatives believe in. They don't view our version of feminism even as a facet of feminism. Why do you think this is, and how can we make up for it?
Because abortion is a sacrament to today's feminism. And if you do not believe in so-called reproductive rights, aka decapitating a child in the womb, then you are not a true feminist. Because what today's feminism wants to do is to take away all gender differences. And a gender difference is that females are burdened with the possibility of getting pregnant. They are stuck with this child, whereas the man can walk away. They want women to be able to walk away. Abortion is the way that women can walk away. Not really, but they feel like they can walk away from abortion. So that is fundamental to today's feminism, that men and women have no differences. They're just social constructs, this idea of masculine and feminism. We need to put down all barriers possible, and abortion is central to that, because our childbearing, our ability to have children, is really the thing that makes us weak. It makes us different. And so they want to be able to get rid of that. That's why they can't take a pro-life feminist. Now, I'm not a feminist at all. I'm just not. I don't think feminism is necessary. I don't think it's done anything good for society. There is this narrative that because of, women can vote now, women have all of these rights because of feminism. It's not because of feminism. It's not. It's just the natural evolution of society. Every good thing that we've done, whether civil rights for minorities, whatever it is, has been a step closer to the meaning of our Constitution, not away from it. So people say the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, it's bad because it built a country that had slavery, it had Jim Crow laws, women couldn't vote. Yes, but all of those things were diversions away from the fundamental truth that we were founded on, that all men were created equal and were endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, not in spite of that. So women getting the right to vote, black people getting the right to vote, the end of slavery, the end of Jim Crow, the end of, the Japanese internment camps during World War II, all of those things were a step closer to the fundamental truths on which we were founded, that all men were created equal. That truth manifesting itself in greater and greater portions throughout history, that accounts for women's rights. That accounts for equality, not feminism. All feminism has done is made people feel guilty about being wives and moms. Are we good? Okay. Oh, thank you so much.